Good afternoon, everyone, to our last day of lectures here in Bled during the Abeceda Contemporary Music Festival. I'm glad to see that you're all here. It's so sunny outside, and I think we all would rather like to be in the water right now than here. So thank you for being here. That's really kind, and thank you for Abeceda for the opportunity to present today. This is not going to be a lecture, because I don't have to lecture you about anything, really. It's more me having questions. And I would like to sketch those questions a little bit that might turn into propositions and then reflect upon those propositions together with you. And in fact, these thoughts have been inspired during the workshops we did in January with Alistair, reflecting upon our artistic practices. And I felt like something started there with respect to the topic of this lecture, which is doubt. And so I reflected more upon it and hope to get into it with you today. As you know, I'm not only composing and being involved with music, but also a social scientist, so this lecture will not so much be about what I do in order to come up with music, but more about what I do in order to come up with meaning to survive in this society, in this complex society, and this world that poses so many questions to our existence. And one aspect is doubt. So I want to talk about doubt and how we can integrate it into our interactions, into our social communication, and in fact, since we're here in a creative environment, to make it part of our creative integrity, because I think that could maybe be interesting to try to do that. So we talk about music a lot, and the first two slides I'm going to show are the same slides we had during the workshop. And I started with a disclaimer. Talking about music is, I think, impossible, and at the same time, we need to do it. Well, because, you know, not only do we have music, but we have words. And I can see how all the talks we did and all the interesting discussions we have were trying to make meaning, to describe our approaches to music. And in fact, you know, words are relatively good doing so. And when we see, as composers, how we translate our ideas into music, we do it via words and symbolism. So it is helpful, but it is also at the same time very limited. You know, this morning under the shower, I thought how, in fact, you know, we are like astronauts a little bit. You know, the music is the space, and we have our little spaceships, which are the instruments to get into this realm, you know, which is hard to understand, and to go where no man has gone before, you know, if you like Star Trek. So yes, it's highly personal, of course. How could it not be personal? And we try to objectify it, and then it's philosophy immediately if we try to come up with a common understanding of what we describe. Very, very intimate and fuzzy and incomprehensible, and you get what I'm trying to say here. So don't pin me down to what I say. You know, maybe it's stupid. Maybe, you know, tomorrow I think differently of it. You know, because I am, you know, also shaped by the doubt I want to talk about. But I'm a human being, and I perceive things differently constantly. So I'm insecure about it. There's a lot of contradictions, but nevertheless, it's lots of fun. And the interactions we had during this week were so inspiring, and we shouldn't stop to try to make meaning out of music. But then most importantly, we shouldn't stop to just make music, you know. And how beautiful is it that we have something that doesn't need words. So there's music, just music, and then we try to fuck it up with words. But anyway, here we go. So the question is, what's our artistic practice? What's mine? And try to share it. I will share it again. And one of my principles, the first, has been like sharing limitations, contradiction, doubts, and vulnerabilities. So I find that this is really important. And this is informed by the way I see our societies and the world, where everyone tries to make each other believe that they know what they are doing. And this annoys me, because if you look behind the curtain, you ultimately realize, okay, everyone has their doubts, and sometimes you have these narratives and stories, and you're so impressed, and then they tell you how it came about, and you go, oh yeah, now it makes sense. If I would have known that part of the story that you don't share so much, you know, it would have made me feel better, actually. Yes, but now back to music. For me personally, that is, I try to avoid ideology as much as it is possible. Of course, you always have to create some kind of meaning, some kind of a pattern, some kind of template in order to make meaning. I try to avoid it, yet I'm super impressed by people that are very sure about what they do. And I'm not arguing against security. It is something great. If you're sure about something, then you should fight for it. But you should not neglect maybe also the insecurities and the doubt. And for me, and this is the important bit, music has become more and more so, for me personally, and we heard this before, like music in order to survive, music in order to keep on going. And it's true, like you probably know the VUCA world, that they describe, a world which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's the world we live in. It is really complex and doesn't make sense sometimes, and it's lots of contradictions, and it's obviously super complex. And for me, music is a means to consolidate that, because obviously you find all of this within the music, but the music also can embrace you, like a hug, and say, but it's fine, it could turn into sound, into beauty, into something that ultimately, at least for a brief moment in time, makes a lot of sense. Then, of course, the non-binary approach, like, which we see, of course, in societies and in politics, also in music, overcome the idea of either or, And you can be here, either there or there. You can change this on a daily basis, but don't make it an ideology. Just say you don't have to stand there and stay there forever just because you decided that's where you stand. You can change that. You can try to overcome your own silos a little bit, try to break free. And I think what we've been doing here during this week is exactly that, trying to reach those boundaries and see how it feels like. Human-centric, for me, who's dealing a bit with artificial intelligence, becomes ever more important. What does it mean to be human-centric and analog, and how can we, find this, who we are, especially also with music in a time that is heavily and will heavily be shaped by algorithms who are maybe momentarily stochastic parrots, but in the future might be more like digital singularities. We don't know where this is going. And then there is the interest in melody and so on. I don't want to now talk about my music, although I'm very tempted to do so, because we had this during this week, and I would like to also maybe share my own ideas, but this is not what I came here to do. Now, in the end, then there's this Nietzsche thing, of course. Without music, life would be a mistake. And again, this is very true for me. And in the morning, I thought, probably without music, there wouldn't be life. I mean, as we know it. I don't see it as an add-on to the beauty of it, but it's a very integral aspect of the possibilities of our existence, which is nice. Anyway, let's talk about doubt. How doubt came into it, because the first principle has been sharing limitations, contradictions, doubts, and vulnerabilities. And during the workshop, I think this is what we talked about the most after my presentation. Then I felt, okay, let's dive into it a little bit more. I think, and what part music could play, and in particular artistic practice, and the way we communicate, and whether we could set an example of integrating this idea of doubt more, openly. And I'm not talking about just sharing anxieties and vulnerabilities, just allowing for doubt even in the face of our uncertainties. Not say, I know, and therefore this is how you must, and then blah, blah, blah. This is what I think, maybe I'm wrong, So nothing is certain, but everyone seems to be. This is true when you face political discussions. This is true when we are on the internet, on Instagram with these videos. People explain to you, they know everything, which pillow you should use, how to prepare your breakfast, and they tell you, and they know. It's like, wow, okay, brilliant. And everyone is just constantly out there, and I never see anyone saying, I don't know, actually. No one is sharing their doubts so much. And then the other thing is, you have heard this, the bubbles and the echo chambers. Echo chambers is quite funny in the context of a music festival. But so, we come up, because that's, of course, we need to do this. The first step is to consolidate your identity and then to meet with like-minded people. How beautiful is that? We've been doing it this week. Amazing, yes? But then you shouldn't, but then you tend to isolate yourself in that bubble where everything is nice. And then doubt and the other is externalized. It's always outside, because now you found the inside, and that feels beautiful. And you can tell yourself how great this is, and all the others don't understand. And that feels good, but it's probably not real, you know, because in the other bubbles, the same things are happening. So we isolate us there. And then the next thing is, I call it narratives as icing to suffocate the doubters. So I was a couple of months ago at a conference, and we were talking also again about AI, and the question was, oh, well, is it a chance, or is it a risk? Is it utopia or dystopia? And one person who works for a counseling, company, she said, oh, we just have to work on the narrative. We have to find a positive narrative, and then everything will be good. But and they said, yeah, and everyone was like, yeah, applause. Whoa, the narratives. And I say, but what do the narratives change? So if people are scared, why don't you take them seriously? And you need to meet the reality. You won't fix reality by creating beautiful narratives. You've just created a beautiful narrative. So that doesn't help. We don't fix the problems with the right arguments or with the beautiful stories. This is more to ourselves really, to say, yeah, no, this is what to say, this is what to think. But it doesn't change really the reality. So narratives are really dangerous. Everyone fancies them. I find them highly irritating because it's a quick fix just to feel good, maybe. And then, of course, there's opinions, ideologies, that, and the exclusive positions. And again, of course you have to come up with your own, but then at some point you have to be willing to doubt that a little bit. I don't want to go into everything because that might take too long, actually. But maybe, the last thing, since we are a little bit political too, authority and totalitarianism, which seems to be on the rise, which is also in that respect, we live, for the most part, in democratic societies, which gives us a lot of rights, yes? But it also implies the duty to take care of our society. So we must always come up with a collective we at the end of the day. We cannot go back to our bubbles and say, here I feel good, you do whatever you do, but ultimately you are the problem. We have to come up with something. Because, what we're trying, or what we see is we want to give up the burden of sovereignty a little bit by asking someone to make the decisions for us. Someone who has the idea, someone who is strong, just say, okay, fuck off, you take care of it, it's too complicated. I'm not responsible for this, I'm in my bubble, and that's good. And I think, that might be, they get us with what I then say, this provocative certainty, because they have the lines. You say, this is the problem, and the answer would be to do A, B, C, D, E. And I don't think that this is a solution. And I find this scary. I think, we should maybe also come up and reflect upon our own positions more with the possibility not only to have doubt, that's natural, but to share the doubt, to say maybe, but maybe not, and let's try to work together on the maybe not more to come up with what unites us. So provocative certainty as the contemporary attitude. So translated into music, I'm sure you won't have a hard time to find this there too, in the various schools of thoughts, in the hierarchies, in the power structures, in the who belongs and who doesn't belong, in the attitudes, in all these discussions. And I think we translate naturally, because music making is a social practice, which is the beautiful thing. The music is there in itself, but it comes to life as a social practice. So we transform everything we do in our everyday lives into this music. And now the question is, do we have a chance to change this practice or to experiment with a new approach in order to, for ourselves in this microcosmos, test a different way to operate together. So, and how we doubt, that's what, of course I'm German and I bring the Faust because that's what you do. So, yes, we doubt, and we all doubt, but the question is, how do we doubt? And isn't it great, like I've studied, yada, 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 jurisprudence, medicine, and theology and whatnot, and here I stand, poor fool, after all these years, and I dived into it like very deeply, and I know all the words and the terminology, and I have this very, complex train of thought here, but I'm a fool. I'm no wiser than before, and I see that we can know nothing, and his heart will break, and maybe we should not do it like Faust, because then he obviously seeks the devil, yeah, and asks for power to overcome the doubt. And then it tries to Gretchen like turn to younger women. It's not very modern. So, and we also shouldn't pathologize it. So it's we are not sick because we doubt. So we don't need to work on our doubt. We need to work with our doubt, because it is part of our identity. And this is, by the way, maybe it was on the slide before, or it comes after. Especially AI and so on. The algorithm doesn't doubt. This is it's just the stochastic parrot. There's no doubt in that. It just does what it does. You cannot anthropomorphize now the AI, but so, and we can. This is ultimately what decides us in a way from the maybe beautiful or not so beautiful future of a world shaped by artificial intelligence. But we have that doubt in us, and let's embrace it. Let's try to be that the creative impulse. So, what could that even mean? And now here's the important bit. Again, I'm not asking lose your certainty. I'm not saying lose your beliefs and substitute certainty with doubt. Well, that would be stupid. But I'm saying you have your doubts and share those doubts maybe as part of your certainty, as the other side of certainty, so that we can see it's more complex than just someone else telling us what's the right way to go on. To do about things. So the underlying hypothesis, it's not even that really, but so by questioning our certainties and accepting uncertainties, we can reach a way of artistic integrity and social reconciliation that makes room for new inclusive communion that then enables us to better meet the challenges we face as societies, maybe, but also in music. And how? By sharing a doubt not as a weakness, not trying to come up with the strong narratives. I know I'm but as an integral part of the creative process, allowing for deeper insights, honesty, and more authentic expressions, and that beyond vulnerability. So I'm not saying it's not a passive thing, right? I'm not saying I'm ready to get hurt because that's what love requires, but I'm ready to doubt also what I'm sure about, in a way. So yeah, and then, this is then political again, also to find a new universalism. I think we live in a world where that doesn't exist anymore. Everything is relative and ethics is relative, and there's ethical pluralism and whatnot, and there's different norms and everyone can come up with their values and there's different cultures and so on. But what unites us, if there's nothing that unites us as humanity, how will we create a future that is not just, anarchy and war, and you see where this is going. So maybe by allowing for that self-doubt to be part of ourselves and the narratives ultimately too. And this is not a methodological doubt vis-a-vis something else, which it's not. I doubt everything that you say, and I doubt everything that you say, but maybe also maybe also myself. And if we start with this to allow for, I think what I'm actually looking for is a new way for discourse and process and working together, and this also in the interaction, in the concert hall, in the practice room, in the creation of a work and so on, to come together with this, listen, I don't know, you go play, or the player, this is, not playable. I've seen rehearsals which were quite interesting in that respect. Is there more? Yes. So, and that is now to discuss with you, really. Can self-doubt, and if so, how, be reflected more openly and compassionately in the music, and maybe more so in the artistic practice that creates the music? And can music sound and its composition facilitate, in that respect, a safe space to feel and acknowledge our individual and collective doubt and the fear it might produce as the common denominator of our experience? And I think we've, to some extent, seen it here at abeceda during this week. And can self-doubt at all, as an artistic or social creative practice, inspire? Or is it just nonsense formulated by me? So this is basically, the impulse I'm doing struggles to find expression. I try to find some form. It struggles to sketch a thought, really. And the terms I use are accurate, probably in and of themselves right now. But this is the words I have at my disposal right now. I could have sang you a song instead, but I think it would have been more complicated to get the message across while singing. So, that is the question. What do you think? Thank you very much. Okay. Questions?
Okay, that's really fascinating talk, and I'm still trying to sort of, the ideas are percolating in my head, but there seems to be a tension between doubt and resilience, and that's kind of status of doubt not being a resilient state. I wonder if you have any thoughts, first of all, on how to maintain doubt when it seems that as we get together collectively, that kind of sense of security becomes emergent and doubt is stripped away.
Yeah.
And secondly, whether you see this tension in your own ideas, particularly because doubt, to me, seems like it relies on multiple competing narratives, and the fewer narratives you have, the more certainty there is. And you talked a bit later in your presentation about trying to find a new universalism, and I wonder if it works kind of as a counteraction to doubt.
So there is both spectrums. When I talk about a new universalism, this is of course maniacy. This is the ultimate. Let's not go there so much. Maybe to the other spectrum. How can we practice it? Because you're absolutely right. If this only happens in a society or in a group where everyone is ready and willing to do this, because if you, and I'm not saying non-hierarchy doesn't really exist. There's always a slight hierarchy of sorts. But if it's a positive, intrinsic hierarchy, that could work. But if you have a hierarchy and one, say, practices self-doubt openly and the other one doesn't, he will just simply exploit you and your position.
It's like a game theory kind of thing.
Well, if you describe it that way, but you can practice it more subtly, I think, as a self-training. If you the way you criticize others, for example, or the way how harshly you interact with positions of other people, where you are so sure they suck and they must be wrong, that you allow maybe for the possibility to let it be for a moment and try to open up by saying, okay, maybe my certainties are not right there. So I try to open a space of dialogue, really. And I think dialogue cannot happen if we just exchange our certainties. And if we don't allow to be, we have to allow ourselves to be surprised again. And also not only in beautiful ways, but also in uncomfortable ways. This is also allowing for irritation in a way. And I see, which is a natural process, that we tend to, and we learn to try to demand that of others most of the time. But if we always want the others to change, and the others also basically want us to change, then no one will change. We will just blame each other forever until it explodes, maybe. And this is the political argument. But in the creative argument, that would be just first of all, and then there's two levels. If the musical culture, if there would be more room for doubt, where you can see, okay, actually things can go wrong, or things are not perfect or not certain, then you learn to be more daring. And if you are more daring, and if you are more willing to, maybe ask the supposedly stupid questions or demand the blah blah blah, then you open up new realms of possibility, because you end up at a place where you wouldn't have gone otherwise. If let's say, but then I think, by the way, this is not, I must say, because I feel this is what's happening at abeceda to a certain extent already. But if you meet and both parties don't really know where to go, especially also in the interaction of a composer and a musician, to share. It's like, or not even you have a score, and then maybe the musician says, well, I have to now be able to interpret this score because I'm a professional, and then you play. And you as a composer, you hear something that maybe you don't, but you don't question it because you think, oh yeah, this is probably how it must be interpreted. So that that doubt meets there, and you clarify, or you find you know, what is anyway so hard to describe with the symbols and so on. So, you know, does this make sense slightly? Yeah.
Yes.
Good,
yeah.
good,
Yeah.
good, yeah.
I have at least 3 different trains of thought I would like to pursue.
Yes.
I'll try to just solidify them as much
Yeah,
as possible.
yeah.
But one of the first things I'm thinking of now, and I am someone who, I consider myself to be someone who relatively openly expresses my doubt,
Yes.
embraces my doubt,
Yes.
and tries to incorporate it into my practice. So much so that when I come to rehearsals, I know fully well that I will change things,
Yes.
and that doubt is built in,
Right.
to, you know, the piece and how it will then shape. Like, the score is never final, you know. And so part of me wants to, since we have some performers in the room, part of me wants to get their perspective on composers expressing doubt,
Right.
you know, because
Yeah.
we have this idea that, or, you know, something I was taught in my undergraduate studies was that if you don't take your own music seriously enough to know exactly what you want, then how can you expect that from anyone else?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's an argument for and against that, I will say, but I wonder what it's like for the performers when a composer shows up and isn't exactly sure,
Yeah.
especially when perhaps there aren't that many rehearsals scheduled. Looking at my
Yeah.
own piece from
Yeah.
this week.
Yes.
And I also, you know, I want to address that question, or at least like just, you know, ponder it. But I also wonder, somewhat in a similar vein maybe, who, like the politics of doubt, you know, who has the luxury of expressing their doubt openly. I'm thinking specifically about composers who have been historically excluded due to their gender,
Yeah.
race, background,
Yeah.
and the fact that in order to enter into this field and to be taken seriously, they really had to kind of strike out and come in with this aggression.
Right.
And so I just wonder how that is incorporated today, you know, with these composers who are perhaps more accepted than previously, but surely by no means completely and universally.
And 3.
And I'll go ahead and throw in my third ponderance in this horribly run-on question, which is, because I think it's all connected, is that when we talk about doubt in this way, I don't think it is limited to just self-doubt. I think it's also doubt of the future and the kind of scarcity mindset that
Right.
there is with, you know, composition being, you know, in some ways a career and needing to have money, and institutions, you know, needing assurance that they will make good on their investment if they choose to invest in a composer. You know, and so I wonder what an embrace of doubt would look like on an institutional level, on these institutions that have the power to, like, give composers agency to explore their doubt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't know where
thank
to
you.
start with that,
Yeah.
but, you know, just some ideas.
No, I think so. The first question is easy to answer because I can't answer it, and we should pass it on to the musicians. So the question is, how do musicians express doubt?
I have to oblige.
Yes.
So this is also because I compose, and it's a very common thing to a rehearsal of any of my pieces, that in rehearsal there's a lot of changes and some doubts for sure, and so I really have very little bias towards seeing that when a composer has doubts about someone else has that. And also I do notice that very quickly there's a sentiment amongst whichever situation it is. I'm speaking now general from experience amongst my fellow performers that that goes towards the conviction of how could you have doubt if you wrote the piece? You should know exactly. And a sort of almost patronizing attitude being born from that. I do notice that in general. So that's why it's curious that you said this question. I see it. I think it's okay. What I say is for my own pieces, because I know it's also it has its own energy tax to change things, to give attention to doubts in the rehearsal process, especially when that time is as scarce as it so usually is for contemporary music. However, I do, and I understand that it might be more exhausting to do that, but on the other hand, it's something new we're creating here. I think we should be in position to handle that in rehearsal process.
Can I? So you partly answered that question, I think, now as a composer also, right?
Yeah.
Could you, so as a musician, how about the role of self-doubt when you are as a musician present and you perform and rehearse a new piece?
I'm very practical when it comes to that.
Yes.
So if I know we have the last rehearsal and we're in the last 15 minutes, I just know there's no time to address certain things that are not. So there's a scale of critical. Let's say there still needs to be 3 things done. There needs to be a hierarchy of those priorities need to be set. If something's not a priority and doubt arises, if there's no time, we cannot do it.
Right.
So we move on as swiftly as possible, if you ask me.
Right. Yeah. So that's one condition for applying self-doubt as a means of artistic creation would be time.
Yes.
You would need the, I also said safe space, which is, okay, first the equality of the people that are present, and then time to express the self-doubt. Because, because I can see from your question, you have 2 aspects. So you write something as a composer and you have your ideas about things and you make your score, and you just always can rely on the fact that, okay, the musicians are professionals, they know how to play that, and then I find, is there also a level of, as a musician, could you say, okay, listen, I cannot play this, or would you rather then interpret it in a way that you can, or how would you, is there room for that? Is that a practice you think?
Yeah, I think there is room for that.
Yeah.
Then it's just a matter of having a system to address that in a time-efficient manner, perhaps after the rehearsal, and a matter of being composed enough to keep it in your mind and go to the composer to address it. Because sometimes you simply forget,
right.
Depends. We have quite a schedule here, for example. So, I think, and I have very good experience with every time I did that.
Right.
And if the composer says no to, let's say, a suggestion or to change, that's also okay. I mean, dialogue, right? Dialogue can exist. And also, whatever is, like, again, practicality needs to be there.
Yes.
However, if something cannot be realized in the process of, let's say, a preparation in question, perhaps it can be realized next time.
Right.
And perhaps that can be addressed only verbally or something.
Right. Thank you. I have to still, but I still have your 2 questions here. But Maximiano, if it is related to no, then keep your thought for a moment. And we don't have much time, so maybe raise your question anyway, and then I address all of the questions in one final remark.
Should I talk?
Yes.
Yes, what I was thinking is that also maybe doubt and certainty are not complete opposites, like they can live together.
Right. Yes.
Like when you say, I'm completely sure that I will have a doubt in the moment of the rehearsal.
Yes, that's basically also partly the argument, that certainty shouldn't be negated by doubt. It's not.
But also you said something beautiful when you said that you needed to be fragile in order to love.
Yes.
And maybe this is the role of the composer, like
Right.
to
Allow for.
love
Yes.
the people that
Yes.
are giving the time to listen to you, to play your music, to have interest in what you are doing, while constantly being in doubt that it doesn't have any value, probably.
Which would be almost, you know, the perfect statement to end this, you know, like have love shine over everything. That would answer my question that I didn't ask. Can this self-doubt as something which ultimately should give strength be part of the music, and that would be through love? But still there's these two questions I want to at least touch upon when you said, okay, how do you doubt in a world where doubt is not asked for, you know, where there's no room for doubt? This is of course exactly the problem. I think the world is, or we as societies, and we must understand that we as artists, as musicians, as composers, in the moment we do what we do, are part of this society. We are not outside of it. You know, it's not happening, the problems of society are not happening outside of our world. We are part of this world. You know, it's not the politicians fucking everything up and the right-wing people and so on and so on. The world happens in the moment we are in it, and this is where we are. You know, so this is why I think, yes, you're right. It can go totally wrong, and especially, you know, as a woman, as a minority, you know, whatever identity you want to get through. No, it's hard. You know, you have to apply and play with the power mechanisms in order to prevail. But I don't think the way we handle it will get us very far. You know, it will. You know, and I try to come up with a means to allow for a future that sounds so big. No, for a constructive and humble and possible exchange, where identity becomes possible, not as part of categories that are defined outside of us, but as something we create as part of our insecurities, while being open to each other, and create beautiful music, of course. Sorry, thank you very much. That's it.
Everyone. Thank you. Before we jump into things, just as an energy exercise, feel free to do as you are comfortable, but can we stretch up together and just give ourselves a second? It's fine, do as you need, do as you're comfortable. And just to the left and to the right. And now just freestyle as you need, just to keep the energy. Yeah, good. Hi. It's lovely to be speaking with you all. Thank you so much for being here today. So I love sounds. I love this opportunity to explore sounds and different musical languages and traditions with all of you. Part of the tricky aspect of this, I feel, is that, you know, everyone is so much themselves, so much their own person, and so much in the interest of self-actualizing their own musical languages and interests that, you know, how do you create a dialogue and a conversation that can orient everyone towards, oh, how can I achieve the next thing, or how can I be conscious of this or that? And so for this playlist, I want to talk about elements of musical form in a wide variety of different musical and sonic works. And in addition to form and kind of the narratives that form naturally implies, maybe, yeah, I want there to just be a variety of listening. So we try to maintain an openness to the world of sound and everything it has to offer. Because, like, who am I as one person to say that this is what all this should be, or this is what all that should be? Yeah, so for the first listening, I've put into the group chat the copy of the playlist, so we can listen later. For this first listening, the artist is Deva Premal and the Gyuto monks of Tibet. This is an order that has been around since the mid-1400s. And yeah, this is the invocation. This is the beginning and introduction to this service. Yes. I apologize for interrupting. But yes, this is Invocation from Deva Premal and the Gyuto monks of Tibet. As with all of these pieces, you know, it's a shame that it's unfeasible to listen to each one of them in their entirety and in their original context. So I'd really like to encourage you all to listen to all of these musics within their original context and to experience them deeply, because there's so much about this that we can't, that just can't be communicated in a short period of time. The main aspect of this that I want to think of is maybe within an abstraction, like a form or chant form in general. You know, within so many musical traditions across the entire world, there's the repetition of one sound, or maybe one particular sonic idea or phrase, or however we shall conceive of it. And part of what I think is really powerful or really interesting about this form is it forces you to trust in sound in a way. It forces you to say, you know, it's minimal in the type of way where, you know, you need to listen to the sound itself, you need to work on the sound itself. And yeah, I think like slower pieces, slower listening pieces, pieces organized in this case by the breath. Yeah, it's a very special moment, and it allows for reflection on what is the essence of this one sound, or what is this essence of the one sonic material. I also introduced this because, you know, like it's so easy for us to only approach music maybe from one context, and I don't want to try to project Western classical or other ideas into this sound space, because it's not. It exists in its own world that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. But yeah, this openness to the context of sound and this willingness to do something again and again and again to fall in love with the true nature of the sound, I think is a great thing to start with for the A form. So this next piece is For Ashley by Andrew Norman with the cellist Ashley Bathgate. And if you could listen to this maybe as the idea of A repeating, but with a theme and variations mindset. There's more going on in this piece than that, but yeah, let's take a brief listen. Me so much to excerpt these. I apologize for this. No, because I want to keep the energy moving and to go deep with each of these, but yeah, there's a difficulty in this with time. So there are so many examples across repertoire of the idea of theme and variations, either in an abstracted form or in a like maybe traditional form with Paganini or various studies and related. I think what I love about this particular form as an idea is that it's like, you know, if a form is going to an art gallery or an exhibit and sitting in place and like looking at and being immersed in the thing, theme and variation idea just as an abstract, like this sound and then this sound with a slight change going from bum ba bum bum ba da 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 bum ba dum bum ba da 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 bum ba da ba da da, like the slight nuances. It's like being able to get up in the space and walk around the art piece, or however you conceive of it, and see all of these nuances and layers to it. Yeah, I think it's really quite special. So if you want to generate a ton of musical material too, you know, it's a great way of seeing like how much mileage you can get out of just one idea. Like how can it gestate and grow into all of these directions, not just what is the seed, the root, what are the branches. So for the next is supposed to be an example of sonata form. I don't want to stay on this too long because like classical music, you know, you talk about sonata form for like 200 years. So like, I feel like, yeah, but the main idea, so this is the Chopin F-sharp minor prelude, actually, it's not a full sonata, but it's that main idea of a central theme in the form of exposition, development, and recapitulation that I think is an interesting idea, because it's the idea of sounds inherently possessing the capacity for a story and for a plot line, and then attempting to have the sound develop in this in this framework. And so even if this is more a traditional repertoire piece, I don't know, not everything needs to be sonatiform, everything can be its own thing, but this idea of the development of an idea, it can be useful, it can be fun, and this piece is just something else. That piece is brief enough that it's difficult to excerpt. Under 2 minutes, and look how much can happen. With the idea of sonatiform, you have the idea of it. I don't know how much to really restate. A lot of history and analysis with this. I don't think it's necessarily productive. But yes, the idea of a theme, and you get to see how it emerges, how it progresses through different landscapes, and how at the end, has it changed as a result of going on this journey. And this, I think we can abstract this as a form. I think sonata form can exist within multiple musical languages and frameworks. And I think the idea that it needs to exist particularly only within this tonicized, older classical method is, I don't know, I don't want us to limit ourselves to the possibility of this is the only way that theme and development and recapitulation, focusing on the theme, can work, if that makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about the presence of one musical idea, one sound, etc., and how this can vary or develop. This next piece is the third movement of Jurisa's String Quartet No. 1, Infinite Season. Jurisa is a contemporary composer based in Princeton. She was born in Korea and grew up in Korea and currently lives and works in America. And this piece is, I want us to think about the transition from one musical moment or idea or material to another. So think A to B, really focusing on the transition. So the premise of her first string quartet is it's responding to Vivaldi, the Vivaldi Four Seasons. Only each movement of this string quartet, and please listen to the full quartet if you have a chance. The performers are Urgis Quartet. This quartet isn't about each movement is a season. Each movement of this quartet is the transition from one season to the next. And so this movement is summer to fall, and there's the idea of the cicadas emerging from the ground, flying into the air, and eventually dying and falling back to the earth as fall comes. Yeah, it's astonishing. And I feel as though this is a very useful idea, A, B, in just like transitions and change and lack of stagnation in daily life. Because like, if I'm going to work, whether that work in my life has been like going to make coffee at a coffee shop or going to be an assistant for this office or any number of things, you know, the change of taking one route from home to work versus another route, like you can get from A to B in so many different ways. And I think encouraging yourself to transform from one groove or one sound space, not just sonically, but also just in a life sense, like how can I switch things up? I will reorganize my room every couple months just to make sure I'm still cleaning it and still thinking of like new ways of orienting myself. So I think, yeah, I think the element of change is really important, and I enjoy thinking about this. So this next song, I want us to think about, and so this is a song more than piece, I think is proper. I want us to think about like the idea of maybe, sorry. I want us to think about the idea of like ABA, and I wanted to include at least one like proper American musical theater piece. And ABA is such a like quintessential form within American musical theater because it has this idea of, okay, you have a problem, you have some kind of conflict, you have an issue within A, and then for the B section, like this needs to come to a head, you need to find a way of resolving it or going outside of it. And then for the last A or the A prime, it's, you know, have we been able to go outside of it and come to some sort of resolution? How have we been changed? Or, you know, have we failed and is there a tragedy to this situation? And this is maybe one narrow way of looking at ABA. You can also like look at it as an inflection point. You know, the A is where you are, you transition to a B, and then it inflects around that point. But yeah, I'm curious to include this. This also has lyrics as well, so yes.
In a year or so I moved to the city thinking, what have I got to lose? Got a room, got a cat, and got 20 pounds thinner. Met a guy in a class I was taking with some very well-placed tattoos. He wouldn't leave me alone unless I went with him to dinner. And I guess he was cute, and I guess he was sweet, and I guess he was good in bed. I gave up my life for the better part of a year. So I'm starting to think that this maybe might work, and the second it entered my head, he needed to take some time off, focus on his career. He blew me off with a heartfelt letter. I thought I can do better than that. You don't have to get a haircut. You don't have to change your shoes. You don't have to like Duran Duran. Just love me. You don't have to put the seat down. You don't have to watch the news. You don't have to learn to tango. You don't have to eat prosciutto. You don't have to change a thing. Just stay with me. I want you and nothing but you. Miles and piles of you. Finally, I'll have something worthwhile to think of each morning. You and nothing but you. No substitution will do. Nothing but fresh, undiluted, and pure top of the line. And totally mine. I don't need any lifetime commitments. I don't need to get hitched tonight. I don't want you to throw up all your walls and defenses. I don't mean to put on any pressure, but I know when a thing is right. And I spend every day reconfiguring my senses. When we get to my house, take a look at that town, take a look at how far I've gone. I will never go back, never look back anymore. And it feels like my life led right to your side and will keep me there from now on. Think about what you wanted, think about what could be, think about how I love you and say you'll move in with me. Think of what's great about me and you, think of the bullshit we've both been through, think of what's past because we can do better. We can do better. We can do better than that. We can do better than that.
It's fun. Yeah. Yes. So with ABA in particular, the idea I think of that, yeah, very important is the transformation. You know, this is a person who's wondering, like, I've spent this amount of my life, like, looking for a career in a place that values me and a partner. This previous partner, ghosted her, and so, like, this song is a question of how does she ask him to move in with her? And that's the B. That's the, how do I ask this? I've had this problem previously. How do I approach this problem? How can we do better than this? And how can we go forward from here? There's so many examples of form. The last little bit that I'd like to play is just maybe like a minute of the Light in the Piazza from Adam Gedel. I think this example would be more toward like through composition or free form, where, you know, there's a text, the vocalist is singing a given text about she's no good at storytelling, she's no good at finding the love or the light or the poetry in a given moment, and yet she's starting to find it and see it all around her. And so I like the idea that form is not necessarily completely fixed, that there's so much variety to it, and sometimes the internal logic of the form and the nature of the piece, like, can be allowed to go free and explore as it needs.
I don't see a miracle shining from the sky. I'm no good at statues and stories. I try. That's not what I think about. That's not what I see. I know what the sunlight can be. The light in the piazza, tiny, sweet, and then it grows, and then it fills the air. Who knows what you call it? I don't care. Out of somewhere, I have something I have never had, and sad is happy. That's all I see. The light in the piazza.
I'll stop there, but I guess if there's a main point from this last little snippet of a piece, it's that, you know, sometimes, like, every piece is different, and the internal logic of a piece should be allowed to shine. and to progress as it needs to progress within its own narrative and within its own logic. So I find that people like myself included can sometimes be or feel pressured by form or by a certain idea of this is how sounds should be arranged in a given order. And I think the idea that like being conscious of the narrative and of the various highs and lows or various like moments and touchstones of a piece can be good, but then giving yourself the room to wander and daydream and just have that freedom and not knowing where you're going at all times. In life and in music, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a curiosity and a freedomness that comes with it that I hope we all can experience in some ways. Thank you. I want to be conscious of time. Do we have question time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Great, great. Questions or thoughts or responses? Yeah. Cool, cool. Yeah, thank you all for listening. I put a copy of the playlist into the chat. Yeah, and there are more examples, and you know, there's so many examples of verse-chorus form from Whitney Houston and So Emotional to like we could spend every day of our lives talking about music and not find a bottom. It's turtles all the way down. Yeah, but thank you for looking at these turtles with me. Cool, thank you.
Yes. So, good day, everyone. I'll be speaking about, in the following lecture, I'll be presenting some observations I cultivated in my own instrumental practice. So, I'm basing this lecture in what I consider my primary expertise, that is instrumental performance, with also connecting that to the practice of composition. And I would also note that the nature of the lecture will be somehow speculative. Perhaps there will be some doubt some uncertainties, and let's say it will be more intended as noting down a phenomena that I observe as a performer coming from public education, musical in Europe, I dare say. I received my master's and bachelor's in Slovenia's University of Music, and did exchange in Germany, Spain, and did some traveling across European musical institutions, academies, that is. That I dare say I have a little bit of insight there. Of course, it shall be more as a starting point into more concrete, let's say, proving the points that are at this point, as I said, more speculations, claims that still need substantiation. I do want to note also that I'm, let's say, quite some of the, let's say, analytical apparatus and my skill set for doing theory is being built through my participation in a composition class and other classes by Drea Hochevar, who's my mentor. So there will be, I need to note that lineage there, and also that perhaps some terminology will be outsourced from there, possibly incorrectly. Just to note that down there. Why this? So this is a speculative lecture on discrepancy between mechanics of instrumental performance and hearing. Why I decided to choose to treat this topic is because it is very relevant to myself as instrumental performer with a goal of improving, ideally reaching the, building my skill set to highest level in order to serve in music and in composition as a performer, as a composer. And even though it might have emphasis on the instrumental performance, I think it will be interesting for all of you composers to talk about that, to hear about it, and also I will bring it to a bridge between instrumental practice and compositional practice. So to start with it, I would like to start with working out the term, the notion of hearing. For the purpose of this lecture, I divided it into a couple of subcategories, and through that also, and I was developing my own understanding of what hearing is. What do I consider to be hearing in this case? And I'll just go through the types, and then from those different types, I will dive into the different types of also discrepancies. It's not like there's just one thing there. It will be many sorts and types of, or species of those. And I'll try to illustrate with some practical examples and metaphors. And of course, I'll be happy to hear your questions at the end, and if urgent, in the midst of the lecture. Okay, so hearing. First type of hearing is discerned as the technical, the physical sound. That is hearing the pitches, hearing what could be called, outsourcing the terminology, objective hearing. So as a performer, to be able to hear when an A is played, that is an A, or let's say an interval is played, to discern which interval it is. It's very, very simple and basic, yet with, they're claiming not self-evident at all. So there's the technical, the physical sound. Then there's hearing as the theoretical of the physical of the sound. That would be hearing through a craft. One of the crafts so well known to us as harmony, counterpoint, solfege, and where basically it's about being able to hear the structure, perhaps the function of harmony, where it goes, yeah, what is happening with that. And having that as an ideal of this type of hearing, having an ideal of being able as a performer to not only, let's say, hear my flute melody, but actually understand theoretically the what is happening in, for example, the accompaniment of the piano in a flute piano sonata. Also not self-evident, and stressing the self-evidency. I think there's value in addressing these phenomena that are, I claim, so present, but there is an assumption that, let's say as performers, we know exactly what's happening. I don't think that's really so, you know? And this is, let's say, one part, and again, I'm basing this on my own practice, and where I see improvements for myself possible. I am missing that part to be able to really understand the whole partitura and read it and hear it in real time, which is, I consider, in my own case, I already spoke to Alistair and Claudia, whom I asked to help me a bit to prepare to go through this lecture. I already said I consider that a life project, not something small. I consider it a very substantial task that seems to be, after one exits the education, sort of sorted out, and then we don't talk about it anymore. But I think clarifying these things and addressing them can bring improvements, because the ultimate goal is still to create conditions to perform or compose at an ultimate level of control also. Not that you always need to maintain it, but just to have it as an option. And so to the third type of hearing, this one is, I just named it the indescribable, the transcendent, the intangible of the sound. And let's say this is the one we don't even have to touch here. And here it goes to mention that what I'm talking about today is of fairly technical nature, and not considered as something that, you know, I deem applicable to everything. It's, I think, more on the technical, on the craft side, on the theory side of composition performance. Then music is still, let's say, an organism of its own. And perhaps none of this can be used when one goes to a concert to listen to something. Fourth type is, as a performer, hearing what someone who is not you will hear. So being able to build some of the prediction of what will be heard when you play something, and perhaps here I can, for the first time, expand a bit more into the discrepancy between hearing and the mechanics, since it's, I guess, the most approachable one to set an example with. So hearing what someone who's not you will hear, being able to, as impossible as that might sound, imagine, predict a bit of the reception of a certain audience for whom a composition is performed for. Why this is, again, to have the option of having a bit of control over that. I think in a performer's skill set, that, in my view, is very welcome. As I said, not necessarily applicable. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. You can let it go. You can always say, it stops here, then it's up to the audience to do all sorts of interpretations of it, as it always anyway happens. But especially clear this example can be on the example of cliches, and especially big the discrepancy and the assumption of a performer's skill set can be shown on this case with, let's say, what I observe is that sometimes we are so, as performers, perhaps me as a performer, so full of mechanical considerations about fingerings, breath, and things like that, that I could play something that is carrying lots of historical reference, that is, let's say, at least in, like, let's say, my closer environments, let's say that being Europe, is easily considered as a certain thing. And let's say that is a song being a happy song, you know? It's good to be aware of that at all times, or at least to be able to be aware of that. And especially at a professional level. And what I see is it still happens that this control is not there, and not to speak about contemporary music, where sometimes it's less clear what something will sound like, and you don't know how it will sound like because it was never performed before. And then it might happen that simply it's overdoing the mechanical side, and not, literally not hearing an obvious sound or an obvious perception of a sound. So that's like one of the discrepancy. Not long ago, I was at a wedding of my cousin, and the groom's relatives lady prepared a poem, and her daughter was playing a synthesizer, and she read the poem, and then synthesizer song went on, and at the end, my brother, who was sitting next to me, amateur musician, otherwise in wood making industry, said they couldn't have played a sadder song, you know? And it was a wedding. And of course, this is amateur level, and it was very beautiful that they prepared that. But I claim this also happens at a lesser extent, but still at even professional levels, in perhaps less clear situation. But just as an extreme illustration, you know, of what the discrepancy I'm addressing here is. So that's, let's say, one type of the discrepancy, what one hears. Then also, when it comes to types of the, I'll just dive into the discrepancies now, even though they might not exactly correspond to the different types of hearing, but other discrepancies that were really, I see in the foreground are the discrepancy between what I can, let's say, again, on my case, hear in my mind, and what I can play on the flutes, two-sided one. A simple example is, let's say there's a embouchure exercise where I play, it goes like this, it goes pa, 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 and like that, in chromatic scale, up and down. And what always happens is I miss a tone on the flute. I change the bass tone regularly, and this is probably also one of the first places where, in my rudiment practice, where I observed this. It's very, very simple things to hear that I can hear in my mind, but I cannot easily, first time, clearly play it on the instrument, which is kind of fascinating because it's such a rudimentary level that I started realizing that there's a lack of full congruity between this and this, and it did occur to me, like, how can I be a highest level performer if I don't have that? So that's like probably the essence of a discrepancy I'm talking about here. And perhaps it's interesting to think also how that's, to know that, to talk about that this happens. I think I'm not the only one that this happens to. And also for working with composers, these things happen. It's probably interesting to take it into the account, even though at the end it's simply, there's a score, let's do it, right? And then, again, there's the other side of this same discrepancy where I can play something on the flute and I cannot sing it. Or I cannot discern it even in my mind. Let's say it's out of my singing range, okay? But I also cannot discern it in my mind, which means that I can only play it mechanically. Let's say it's a more complex harmony that I don't have internalized. And it's suddenly, it's like that. So I'm playing something I cannot hear. It's to me, that is quite radical and not, maybe I forgot, but I don't think I've heard a lot of conversation around this. Rather, as I said, I see this something that we veer away from in the light of not giving ourselves out of what we are supposed to already have in our skill set as performers. So yeah, and then that's basically, I guess, the essence, the message. And what I'm talking about here now, as I said, is more of a starting point of mapping this, and where from which I can go towards, finding a solution for this. And when it comes to defining solutions, defining paths towards correcting or optimizing, improving this, developing still, it comes to also what I wanted to specify as compositional hearing. And compositional hearing being the total of all the types of hearing that I categorized. So that being as an option, having, composition basically being all of those. At first I thought, counterpoint and harmony, that's the compositional hearing. But actually, I do consider composition being much wider than that. And all of those, like the technical, theoretical, indescribable, what reception will be, the perception of people that are not you will be. As I said, it's probably impossible, but pardon for the microphone. And also just last type of hearing, which actually came to my mind while listening to James's presentation, and I just wanted to point it out because I think also that is very interesting. As a performer, you need to hear through your bodily experience. That's what I'm learning. There's such different compositions to play, and also here I see still so much to learn from how, in what state your body needs to be to perform a composition correct. You know, you've heard all the different pieces this week. Some that demand ultimate calmness and composure, and others that are just like an overflow of energy and hype to even get through, you know, any of the bars, because it's such a, you know, power. So just as a last type of hearing also, what state does your body need to be in to be able to perform a certain piece? So all of that together is a compositional hearing, and that also brings me to composition as means to improve as your instrumental practice, which is, I guess, nothing new to anyone. Through composition, becoming a better performer as well, especially since, yeah, it basically applies all of these types of hearing in order to produce a composition. And yeah, the value of that, and yeah, the potential being there. I think that is where I can, yeah, I think I can wrap it up here and open it for a discussion, because I have a feeling there we can continue a little bit more if someone has a question, a remark, or anything. Yes. Please.
Oh God. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Just thoughts and one question is like, yeah, I just realized as a composer, you don't have a body, right? Like the body of music. That's what you as the musicians have. You know, you basically have to imagine that, and you cannot really feel this. And this is the ultimate jealousy of the composer.
Especially in your piece.
Yeah.
We heard the veins and the heart and the blood.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and that's fascinating. And another thing, so and you pointed that out, and this is a question that bothers me also a little bit. So I remember from the jazz days, you know, when you're soloing, exactly what you said, it was always, don't play what you don't hear. Yes, because you can easily learn the scales and the muscle memory, and then you just solo away forever, but it means it's just technical and it's muscle memory. So now the question, what do you think? As a composer, should you only compose what you hear? Question.
I think the affordance is that you can actually compose what you also don't hear yet.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Right.
And then it's a matter of, I guess, individual composition practice. And also just to the point of improvisations, since that's where, I mean, probably that's one of the peaks of where you can observe this discrepancy, is when classically trained musicians do improvisation, and this is where my reservation towards calling what is so often called improvisation like that. And of course, being aware that improvisation existed in also Baroque and classical music. But since we so commonly think of jazz, right? I think that people that we know from jazz and are the giants of jazz knew exactly what they're hearing and playing, had this congruity between the two. While you can really hear the just scales when people without this skill set do it. And I observe that in my own practice also, yeah. So.
We've heard a lot of music from many different composers. A lot of us have now done kind of lectures talking about our practices. I've been lucky enough to see some of the scores that people have put in. I was particularly interested, so Jack did this phenomenal piece this morning, and he sent me the score, and I was really surprised when I saw how it had been notated. So something that I'm kind of reflecting on is there are lots of similarities between some of the music that we're producing and big differences between the ideas we have behind them, and big similarities between the ideas that we all have about how we're doing music and big differences between how that translates onto the score. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about the relationship you have as a performer between how things are written down, like the relationship between the score and what the music actually is behind it, because I think it's clear, not even just in contemporary music, but I think in that whole historical canon, that the way music is notated and the performances we want to give, there's always a difference between them. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think that as a performer, you first need to discern how precisely the score is intended to be performed, because some composers really just, it's really important that everything is exactly as it's written, and then there's others that will then also tell you it's not so important that this is like that, but please don't miss making this kind of musical experience for in performance. And there and everywhere, it's still, even when there's a precise notation, there's still so much nuance that can happen. So there, in a different extent and then to the others, but everywhere, the affordance of a performer is to find by yourself, hear by yourself, and really make an effort to find what it is that the composer intended there. And then work towards realizing that as great as possible. And if that requires small changes for that goal, it's usually also welcomed by the composers.
So do you feel that you have a voice, or do you feel like performers have their own voice outside of the composer? It's not just about trying to serve the composer's intention, whether they're alive or dead, and sort of, and how that translates to sort of accuracy, I suppose.
I wouldn't say that that's my voice. I don't think you need my voice there. I think you need me to become that voice, the voice of the composition, rather than, being Gnesia in that composition. It's composition, right? So I do consider composition as something that does not necessarily demand subject to work.
I just wanted to perhaps remark on that, because I also was wondering about notation, and specifically about prescriptive versus descriptive notation, you know, as in like prescriptive being composers who are more concerned with like how you're producing the sound and like giving you exact instructions in tablature. Descriptive being more like traditional notation of it's this pitch, you know, that's just describing a sonic result. It's not saying how to do it. It's assuming that you know how to do it. And so it, like, I think it comes down to a matter of like, what is the priority, right? Like, is it the how? Is it the effort? Is it like the, you know, like the prescribing this method that will maybe result in this or maybe something else? Or is it about like doing what needs to be done to achieve this sonic result, right? Like, is that?
I guess
Yeah.
the second one more, but of course it depends on the composer.
Yeah, of course.
The composer for me has the final words. It's, yeah.
I've also was thinking about like something that came to mind is this phenomenon that like a tool becomes effectively in your mind a part of you the more that you use it. You know, for example, like a computer mouse, when you're using your mouse, your brain, they did a study on this, your brain perceives it as a part of you, as a part of your body, as an extension of your body. And it's only when it fails, it's only when it, you know, starts to lag that you start to reject it and be like, oh, this is no longer my body, you know, on a physiological level, that your body like, it disowns it. It's only in that failure. And I wonder if that's the same for instruments, right? And it's like a matter of, you know, like this idea that we have of mastery over an instrument is really about integration. You know what I mean?
Well, instrument is an extension of the body is the ideal that I think, all have heard of, know, and I think it's makes a lot of sense. I didn't ever intentionally think about the possibility of, rejecting the flute because something is not. But
Yeah, that makes it sound very personal, I suppose.
yeah, and I'm also not entirely clear of the question.
It's not really a question. It's more of just a remark and the idea about like, I don't know, whether, I don't know. Whether there's any synergy there, but I can pass it. I think
guess
Alistair.
it comes to the point where when something's not working, when something is lagging behind, it's I mean, for me, it's just like, okay, it's time to practice. I hope it's a response.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, bringing closer to integration, I suppose.
Yeah. And the ideal is to not have to think about it never lagging, right? It's just there. And it's, operating the way you intend.
Now, maybe the fact that you keep with one instrument in your life is because it's more natural for you. Because maybe when we are a kid and you're like trying, I mean, which will be myself in it, then if you stay with one instrument, even though you can like fail somehow, then you stay. So it's a matter of, keep doing it.
Yeah, and it always demands continuous practice. Also.
Sorry, I just thanks so much for such a wonderful talk. Fabulous. I just was wondering if we could propose another level, and it kind of follows on from a lot of the questions that people have asked here, which would be when you, how can I say this? When you can read something but not hear it. So almost like like reading a novel with aphantasia, and what you might call, I suppose, eye hearing. You know, like for instance, latereo and hum. Right? You can, in one way, there's no way to audiate that score, but you look at it and you know exactly what it sounds like. It's
the snake that eats the world.
Oh no! Fernieho, latereo and hum. But maybe the snake that eats the world as well. You know. And I just wonder if that is, sorry, my brain's breaking again like it did on Monday. If that, particularly within connection to what Darcy was saying about when you push something to breaking point, well, one way of looking at it is that it becomes dissociated. But, and again, apologies for mentioning Heidegger, but in that framework, it would go from being ready at hand to present at hand. Its reality would become very manifest.
Mm-hmm. So
you hear what I'm saying?
You're talking about the possibility of starting to hear something through reaching it mechanically?
I suppose it's like another form of audiation that happens almost when notation is pushed to breaking point, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So within the framework that Darcy brought up, it becomes dissociated and therefore present and noticeable, and perhaps also throws up a different way of seeing. Does that make sense? So instead of hearing, for instance, if you look at an A on a stave.
This is too complex compositional questions.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, if you look at an A on a staff, you can hear the A. I'm not going to say it because I can't say it, but you know what I mean. You can hear that boom. Oh, I've done it. Sorry, but you know what I mean. If you look at Lazar and Hum, you can hear it, but it's not from the notes. It's from the textual nature of it. And there's lots of scores like that, right? That are not audiated, but are imagined in a different way. And just go. So is that like that's another form of hearing?
That opens up a whole new area to this, right?
Well, I'm sorry if that's the case. I thought it would just be another one on the edge, you know, like I don't know, sea hearing.
No.
Searing.
I think that just opens up a whole new
can of worms. Too many. Yeah.
I mean, something perhaps worthy of exploring. And it does remind me of, since I don't have capacity to answer to that, I would like to take that opportunity of addressing the possibility of actually starting to hear through what you are mechanically playing. And also, perhaps really unconnected, but a remark to future possibilities for everyone working in music composition. Possibility of, having a full ensemble of people with really, this skill set to be able to surpass these discrepancies, all of them, even, built on one that you described, not the discrepancy, but the possibility. And how rehearsal process would look like if you had 9 people that were on that level. How different, what everything else could happen in this music. Yes, Alistair, I mean, really thank you for this.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. It's a lot to think about. I really enjoyed the mix of like the philosophy and the technical aspect, like going right down into the nuts and bolts of things. I think we need to do that more. Well, I know I certainly do. Too much highfalutin and not actually dealing with the real stuff. So thank you so much.
I think we have to finish at this point. Yes, thanks for listening.